Every morning she stood at the same bus stop holding a single flower, but she never got on. Weeks went by, and she became part of my routine, her quiet presence, always with a fresh flower in hand. It wasn't just strange, it was haunting in a way. Who was she? Why was she always there? And why didn't she ever get on the bus? That morning I couldn't hold back anymore. I had to know. It was early, the kind of morning where the air felt heavy with mist. I pulled up to her stop, and there she was, standing in her usual spot. This time she held a sunflower, big, bright, and impossibly cheerful for such a gray day. I leaned out the window and called to her. "Hey, excuse me," I said. "I see you here every morning, but you never get on the bus, and you're always holding a flower. Can I ask, why?" She looked up at me, startled. Her grip on the sunflower tightened, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she let out a quiet sigh, and her shoulders seemed to drop under some invisible weight. "It's for my husband," she said. "He passed away last year. I've been meaning to take flowers to his grave, but I just can't. Every time I get this far, I stop. I can't seem to go any further." Her words hit me like a punch in the chest. I wasn't expecting that. I'd thought maybe she was waiting for someone who never came or had some quirky ritual I didn't understand. But this was different. I hesitated for a moment, then said something I hadn't planned, something that just came out. "I could take you," I said. "If you want. You don't have to go alone." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might refuse. But then she nodded, slowly. "You'd do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You'd take me?" "Of course," I said. "My shift's almost over. I've got time." She hesitated, then climbed onto the bus, holding the sunflower like it was her lifeline. The ride to the cemetery was quiet. She stared out the window, gripping the flower tightly, her knuckles pale. I didn't say much. What could I say? I just drove, letting her have her space. When we reached the cemetery, she froze at the entrance. I thought maybe she'd change her mind, but after a moment she took a deep breath and started walking. I followed a few steps behind, giving her room. She stopped in front of a grave and knelt down, placing the sunflower gently on the headstone. "Elijah," she said softly, her voice shaking. "I'm here. I miss you so much. I'm sorry it took me so long to come." She stayed there, talking to him like he was right in front of her. Her words were quiet, almost a whisper, but I could feel the weight of them. I kept my distance, not wanting to intrude. This was her moment, and I wasn't going to take that away from her. After a while, she stood up and turned to me. Her eyes were red, but there was a small, grateful smile on her face. "Thank you," she said. "I couldn't have done this without you." "It's nothing," I said. "Sometimes you just need someone there." We walked back to the bus, and the ride back felt lighter, like she'd left some of her pain behind. The next morning I stopped at her usual spot, but she wasn't there. A part of me missed seeing her, but I also felt proud, like she'd found the strength to move forward on her own. Weeks passed. Then one day, out of nowhere, she got on the bus. This time she wasn't holding just one flower. She had a whole bouquet. She smiled at me as she sat down, and before I could ask, she said, "I've been going every week now. I guess I finally got the courage." I smiled back. "I'm glad to hear that." As the bus rolled along, she turned to me again. "How about I buy you a coffee after your shift?" she said. "You've already done so much for me. I'd like to return the favor." That coffee turned into hours of conversation. I learned her name was Claire, that Elijah had been her high school sweetheart, and that they'd been married for 15 years before he passed. She told me how she'd felt stuck in her grief, how just stepping onto that bus had felt impossible, until that day. And as we talked, I realized something. Life is full of unexpected turns. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can lead to the most meaningful connections. For me, it all started at a bus stop with a woman and her flower.